Welcome to Wellsprings of Faith. My name is Father Jürgen Liias. I'm a Roman Catholic priest. I live here in Melrose. Actually, I've lived here for 33 years, but I'm on the staff of St. Patrick's Catholic Church, which is in Stoneham, as a senior priest. Our program, Wellsprings of Faith, is a program about a person's journey of faith and the fruit of that journey and their faith and their life's work. Today we welcome Sam Whiting. He is a lawyer, and he is the staff attorney for Mass Family Institute. We've had many guests from MFI over the years. It's the premier Christian public policy enterprise in the state here, working for religious liberty and other aspects of the interface of religion and religious institutions in the church and society. So welcome.
Thank you.
So I hope that was an accurate description.
Sounds good to me.
So we'll get to your work as an attorney and what's going on at the MFI. I know you've got a new director there. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, your own life as a Christian, and going back as far as you can remember. Tell us a little bit about your own journey in faith.
Sure. So, I was raised in a God-fearing Christian home. My parents have always, for as long as I've known, they've been believers.
Where'd you grow up?
Actually in Scarborough, Maine.
Oh, Maine.
So,
okay.
yeah, and I actually still live there in Maine, but I telecommute most of the time.
And what kind of church community were you part of growing up?
So I grew up in a vineyard church.
Oh, a vineyard church.
Yep, which is kind of like charismatic, non-denominational type style of worship, so Protestant. Right. But now I actually am a part of an Orthodox Presbyterian church.
Okay.
So also Presbyterian, also Protestant, but more Reformed.
More Reformed, yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting because I remember I was very involved in the charismatic renewal when I was an Episcopal priest, and the Catholic Church for that matter, even to this day. But I remember one of the great heroes in the charismatic renewal was John Wimber, who I'm sure you've heard of him. He was the one who really started the vineyard movement out of California, Southern California, and he was also a rock musician from the Righteous Brothers, which was a great, I don't know if you ever heard of them, but
no, probably a little before my time.
I know. Well, they were one of the big hits when I was growing up as a rock musician, but he had a real deep conversion to Christ. And he was quite a gifted leader in the vineyard movement. So your parents probably would know more about that under his sway. Yeah. Are they still members of that church? Is that still around there?
I don't think they're going to that church regularly anymore. They go to another non-denominational church up there, and then they also, so they have 3 kids that still live in the area. My 2 brothers and I.
Oh, that's nice. Lucky them.
Yeah, and so they rotate between each of our churches each Sunday as well. They during COVID they started.
So all of you are good believing boys, huh?
Yeah. So
that's good. My 3 sons.
Yeah, for sure. Good. And I have 2 sisters as well. They live out of state. But,
all right.
But it's definitely great for my parents to be able to make those rounds.
So, tell us about your own faith journey. Besides growing up, how did that come alive for you personally?
Yeah. So I mean, I can't put a finger on when I experienced saving faith in Christ, but I think my life has certainly been a process of sanctification up from childhood to now, and I ended up going to a private Christian school in the Portland area that I was very blessed to attend as a kid, and I think that was pretty formative for me. Not everybody that went there was a believer, but we had some very good Bible teaching. I think one thing that was pretty formative for me was in high school we had a church history class with a teacher who was a kind of a Presbyterian Calvinist minister, and most of the kids in my class, probably all of us, had never experienced that view before, and so we would just dive in with him on conversations about predestination and all sorts of deep theological subjects that different denominations believe, and that kind of challenged a lot of just the presuppositions that we grew up with, and it was really great to have open dialogue about that. And then from there, I went on to Grove City College, which is a Christian college out near Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and kind of a Reformed tradition in the Calvinist tradition, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Reformed theology is interesting because if you study the you know, I grew up, I've been across a lot of things. I started out a Lutheran, and when I came to this country, I became an Episcopalian. I was Episcopalian for a long time, but I was involved with the charismatic renewal and other aspects and group, and now I'm a Catholic. So
Right.
but the one thing, I guess I'm not an expert on Calvin, but one of the Reformed tradition was one of the more, I would say, one of the more intellectually oriented traditions in this kind of panoply of Protestantism, a kind of commitment of systematic theology and a kind of lot of it's a more, I don't mean cerebral in a negative sense. It just was I know a lot of people, particularly who are like you, or sort of thinking types, find themselves drawn to Reformed theology. And,
yeah, I found that to be true. I mean, I think there's very smart intellectual people in all denominations,
right.
but I did find, I found this to be true with a lot of young believers, where they'll grow up in one tradition and then they'll kind of ping pong over to a different tradition that's on the opposite end of the spectrum, but still within the Christian faith, obviously.
The Christian faith,
and I think for me, it was going from kind of that more charismatic, non-denominational, maybe less theological side of the Vineyard Church, going to a Presbyterian church. In college, I actually went to an Anglican church, so Anglican Church of North America.
Yeah, that's what I was for, ACNA.
Yeah, and I loved that.
Yeah,
I really appreciated the ACNA a lot. So I was drawn definitely to the thought that went into the liturgy, and just all of the thought behind how they worship and kind of the how they develop their theology.
Right.
Although I'm certainly don't claim to be any expert in theology.
So through that time, it was as you said, a kind of ascending journey of sanctification, which is for those who don't know what the sanctification means, it just means you just become literally holier, but not in a pious sense, but in a sense of the Lord's imbuing your life more and more with His presence and a desire to follow the Lord faithfully and obediently. So you never had a good rebellion or anything? It was just sort of, I'm sure you had moments of doubt and
for sure.
Challenge. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I was a pretty good kid, at least outwardly. I think, I certainly struggled with my own sin and everything growing up, and had to kind of wrestle through that, especially, in high school and all that, maybe not showing myself on the outside, the struggles that I was experiencing on the inside. One kind of point of maybe turning point for me in my faith, though, was I remember, I think it was freshman year, coming home for Thanksgiving break. I was driving with one of my brothers, and hopefully he wouldn't mind me sharing this, but he during college, so we overlapped. Actually, this was after he graduated, but he was still down in Nashville, and so he drove up to Pennsylvania on our way back to Maine.
Yeah.
So we carpooled together so that we could have some brother time. And he had kind of fallen away from his faith in college, as a lot of people I think do, especially a lot of people from that generation. I think they didn't have a great theological basis for their faith and kind of grew up in a youth group culture that didn't always give them a very good foundation. And so he was really challenging me on some of the stuff that I believed and questioning, why do you believe in hell? Why do you believe that God's really good? Why doesn't this conflict with science? All that.
Yeah.
And I had thought a little bit about those questions, but I'd never been challenged on my faith like that before.
Yeah.
Especially not by somebody close to me like that.
Right.
And so I felt like I did a pretty poor job of answering his questions. So that made me go into a little bit of a crisis where it's like, why do I believe what I believe? Is this just something that was handed down to me and I've just taken it kind of, just been spoon-fed something, but I haven't really critically examined it. So that made me get a little more interested in, reading up on what is the basis for this? Is this all true? Yeah. One book that ended up really helping me was The Reason for God by Tim Keller.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you've
I know.
read that one,
Tim.
But kind of like an updated Mere Christianity
That's right.
by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And
that's been a very influential book for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think, praise God, that same brother, I think, actually kind of came back to his faith through that book and also through his wife, who's a believer.
A
And
believer.
yeah, so you know.
Yeah, Tim died not too long ago. He was a
Yeah.
powerful, wonderful witness for Christ.
Yeah, he certainly
Great,
was.
great Christian leader. I got to, because I was up in Hamilton area, I remember hearing him speak a number of times at Gordon Conwell, where he'd come and give lectures on preaching and evangelism, everything. Very talented, as well as listening to a lot of stuff on his sermons and podcasts. Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
So that really helped. I mean, I think that's an important part of growth is, I mean, whatever childhood faith we have, it has to mature, and the intellectual component is, we're to love God with all of our minds. It's
Right.
not, we have to love God with our hearts too. It's not just a set of intellectual beliefs.
Certainly not.
But there is a profoundly rich intellectual component to the faith. There are propositions, things we believe.
Yeah.
Creedal statements, stuff like that the church has developed,
Right.
and they're intellectually responsible. I mean, if you really get into it.
Right. Yeah, and I think, one thing I realize is that the intellectual side of things is extremely important, but I think ultimately you can have the best evidence one way or the other, but God has to open your heart to see it.
It has to be conversion of the heart.
And I think by the grace of God, I was open to assessing the evidence and everything. But I think the most important thing that I try to tell younger people now, I help run a young adults group through my church, just Bible study that we're doing every other week. And one of the things I really try to emphasize to those guys and to high schoolers I come across is you're going to run into questions that you don't have an answer to, but don't let that rattle you. Go find an answer, because Christianity's been around for 2,000 years, and every question that anybody's ever come up with has an answer. Now, you may or may not be satisfied with the answer, but there's an answer, and don't, nothing is new under the sun when it comes to objections to our faith. And I think there have been smart people thinking about these things for a long time.
Yeah, that's the thing. Incredibly smart people. Yeah, there is sometimes a prejudice in our culture that, faith is for kind of ignorance.
Right.
It's people uneducated people who aren't sophisticated. But how untrue that is. And, the most brilliant minds in human history most often were minds of faith.
Right.
And use their mind for their brilliance, for the faith.
Right.
So you survived that little encounter with your brother, but it actually deepened
it did,
and expanded your faith, which was good.
Right.
And then, so carry on from beyond that.
So went through college. I certainly can't recommend Grove City College enough to people. A little plug for my alma mater there, but that was.
Yeah, I've known a number of people really have great. That's a great Christian school.
It is, yeah, and they, they have a whole course on science, faith, reason, and technology, and kind of integrating all of those things together so that you can understand that science doesn't have to conflict with faith or faith with science, and they do a very good job of kind of preparing you to have a reasoned faith. That was helpful. Grove City College definitely was a great formative experience, and met a lot of great Christian friends through that. And then I went on to law school after that. I can go into why I chose to go to law school.
Obviously, your faith started asking the question, God, what do you want?
Right.
Here am I. Send me. Tell me where you want me to go.
Right. So I majored in history at Grove City, and I loved it. They had a great history program, really liked it. But I realized, fairly early on that I didn't want to do education because I met some education majors, and I said, that's not me. These guys are really passionate about teaching kids and adapting to different learning styles, and I just like history. I don't know if I'd be a good teacher or not. So I chose not to go that route, and none of the other kind of traditional history careers appealed to me. And actually, my dad is a lawyer, so I grew up kind of being dissuaded from going into law because he, would always come home so stressed from work and say, don't ever become a lawyer. You know, he had his own solo
What
practice.
kind of law did he do?
Just general practice.
Just general
Actually,
practice.
he kind of in our area did a lot of the ministry work for Christian ministries, churches. Has done some constitutional law defending the rights of Christians in Maine. But he was, you know, it definitely has taken a toll on him. It's definitely stressful. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. But as I got closer to my senior year of Grove City, I thought, you know, I've learned really good skills researching and writing and, you know, applying my knowledge to, you know, historical questions and making historical arguments. It seems like that would translate well into law. Maybe I should just think about this, you know, take an actual serious look at this and not write it off if that's something that God might be calling me to do. So I actually shadowed, you know, interned with my dad one summer and ended up thinking, yeah, this is actually something I could see myself doing. You know, I went to court with him a few times and enjoyed it. And so I took the LSAT, which is the admission exam for law school, did well enough on it and applied to some schools and got into some schools. And my the college president at Grove City is a guy named Paul McNulty, and he was a former deputy attorney general for the U.S. And he helped me a lot in kind of my law school search, and so that was great. So I ended up going to George Mason, applying there, getting in there. So George Mason University Law School is in Arlington, Virginia. And actually, funny enough, the summer before I went to law school, it was just another confirmation on top of everything else that I think God gave me. I got called up for jury duty and then ended up serving on a jury for a murder trial, double murder trial that lasted for over a week. And you know, one of the biggest trials in probably many years in Maine. And that was just an amazing experience where, you know, just kind of fulfilling that civic duty, but also seeing how the law works and seeing attorneys in action and thinking
that was like a sign. This is definitely
you know, it's very interesting. Now I don't do criminal law, but it certainly confirmed for me that this is a career I could see myself doing.
And I know, I mean, the kind of law you do now. How did the Lord lead you into that?
Yeah, so I do. So right now at MFI, I'm staff attorney, and I would say, you know, maybe a third of what I do is kind of internal, like corporate stuff, where I'm making sure that we're complying with all the rules and regulations that we have to as a nonprofit.
Right.
But then the other maybe 2/3 of what I do relates to a lot of cultural issues and constitutional law. And I've always kind of been interested in constitutional law. I mean, I couldn't put a finger on where that started, but just hearing my dad talking about it growing up, I was interested in it. When I went to Grove City, I took a class, an undergraduate class in constitutional law, which is a little different than law school, but I really enjoyed reading those cases, and then pursued that interest further when I went to law school, taking, you know, constitutional.
Define a little more for the audience and for me.
Yeah.
What you mean specifically by constitutional law?
Yeah, so I mean, there are kind of different areas of constitutional law, but essentially it's law dealing with the federal or state constitutions rather than dealing with statutes or like common law. Yeah. So constitutional law would be, you know, taking the provisions of the Constitution and using them to, you know, to defend or press a claim on behalf of an individual. And really, I should specify, it's more like civil rights constitutional law.
Yeah, obviously the you know, First Amendment, Bill of Rights, all that is.
So a lot,
particularly
most of the areas that we deal in are First Amendment.
Well, that's right.
Speech and
speech. How did you get connected with MFI?
Yeah, so I started out after law school at a small, just regional firm in Maine, doing kind of general practice civil litigation. So, you know, suing people over land disputes and car accidents and things like that. And I didn't like that, I think in part just because the work I was doing was very stressful and yeah, anyways, I won't go into all of that, but I was looking to make a switch and I was praying about it, and, you know, my wife and I talked about what should I do? I know I need to leave this job because I really don't like it. So I actually looked on a job board that was put up by a legal fellowship that I did, a Christian legal fellowship during law school. And Andrew at MFI had posted an open staff attorney position, and it said you can work remote, and you don't need any certain, you don't need a ton of experience to do this. We'd like you to have some background doing litigation, preferred and all that. But it really kind of fit me as a candidate, and obviously they were looking for somebody who was a Christian, and so I said, what the heck, I'll apply. And yeah, within a couple months we I'd spoken with Andrew, and
So how long have you been working with them now?
just over a year. So I started in July of last year.
Yeah. I mean, I'm connected with MFI as a supporter, and have known. Actually, I go all the way back to the beginning of it when it was, what was it originally called?
Pilgrim.
Pilgrim. Yeah.
Institute. Yeah.
Homer Allen. I don't know if you ever ran into him yet. He was the original director. But I mean, what have been some of the more interesting and challenging legal stuff that you've had to do with MFI the last year?
Yeah, man, there's so much. The state of Massachusetts certainly keeps us busy. But, it's one of the most enjoyable and I think impactful things that I've worked on personally so far is trying to defend the rights of pregnancy resource centers.
Oh, yes. Right.
So pregnancy resource centers are charitable organizations that provide resources for women and babies who have unplanned pregnancies generally. That's not the only demographic. They also work with fathers. They work with people who have planned pregnancies and have low income, but primarily it's women with unplanned pregnancies.
Right.
And unfortunately, the Attorney General's office and many municipalities in Massachusetts see these centers as a threat to the abortion industry.
Yeah, the rage after
the Dobbs decision.
Mm-hmm. Boy, they really have pick on this bunch of volunteers trying to help women, and it's incredible.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. And so, what they've tried to do in a lot of these municipalities is they've tried to pass ordinances that say limited services pregnancy centers, which of course only encompasses pro-life pregnancy resource centers, not abortion clinics.
Not abortion clinics. They're not limited.
Right. So these limited services pregnancy centers can't make deceptive statements, or else they'll be fined, X amount of hundreds of dollars per violation. But of course, it also doesn't define deceptive statement.
Right.
And so really what this is saying is if you say something about abortion or about services relating to abortion that we don't like, then we'll say that that's a deceptive statement and we'll fine you for that. So it's really a kind of a gag order on pregnancy resource centers to not say things that are anti-abortion because the municipality doesn't want them to say things against abortion. So we have pointed out that that's a violation of these centers' First Amendment rights.
Yeah, that's right, just the right of speech.
Free speech.
Free speech.
Yeah, and I mean, it is also related to their religious status, so I think they're very problematic, and glory to God, we've been able to defeat a number of these now. One was just voted down in Worcester, so just indefinitely tabled. I don't.
Yeah, that's right. They sort of back off once they start.
That's right.
Being challenged, particularly once they get into the weeds of the law, right?
That's right. So I mean, their city solicitor over there in Worcester reviewed it and said, yeah, this is not going to fly constitutionally. We should not do this. And East Hampton tried to pass one, and actually we wrote a number of letters to them, and their mayor ended up vetoing it, even though she's pro-choice, just because she said, I'm not going to waste taxpayer money on litigating this in court. So that's been really positive.
So that's been encouraging.
Yeah. Beyond that, I'm dealing with a lot of issues with parents and teachers in public schools, just on a constant basis, especially with gender identity issues.
That's right.
Where students and teachers of faith are sometimes being compelled to use, for example, preferred pronouns for other students or teachers who identify as transgender, which again is a violation of their First Amendment rights and their religious conscience rights. No one wants to be rude. No one wants to put down people because they have this issue with their gender identity, but they also have a right to not be compelled to say something that they don't believe.
That's right. I mean, it's really Orwellian. I mean, it's this kind of totalitarian mindset about language, of forcing people to and threatening them if they don't buy the speech.
Unfortunately we've seen multiple people lose their jobs over this, and in certain circumstances we can help, and in some circumstances we can't. So it's really a difficult issue. And then there's lots of other things, but sex education. A lot of schools in Massachusetts, parents don't know this, but they teach very graphic sex education materials that really are not appropriate for the grade level of kids that they're being taught to, or maybe any grade level of children.
Or even adults.
So we do a lot of public records requests to expose some of that, and we inform parents about their rights to opt out. And now one exciting thing that we're doing is we're getting into the realm of working with school board members who are on our side of these issues to help pass policies that will actually ensure that their school district, does things like turns sex ed from opt-out into opt-in, so it's not the default that you're going to take this graphic sex ed, or gets political symbols out of classrooms so that kids are not always subjected to things, to the teacher's personal political opinions, whether that's a flag or a banner or something like that. Because a lot of parents say, why are our taxpayer dollars being spent to basically indoctrinate our kids into a very much kind of left-wing ideology? Why can't schools just be a neutral place for kids to go? So that's something that we're dealing with as well.
Well, good. I mean, that was keeping you busy, huh?
For sure.
Is it satisfying work?
It is very much.
Yeah,
I'm thankful to God for work that's very fulfilling.
I mean, it's obviously challenging.
Yeah.
And but also, you're not just helping someone collect some insurance money from an accident, which is justice too. I'm not saying that.
That can be sanctified work too.
Yeah, it can be work, but
it
the
feels
sense
good
of really being, and it is, and it is a place of real encounter for us as Christians with the culture.
Right.
And trying to figure out how to, obviously proclaim the gospel in winsome and positive ways, yet at the same time, we have to say, no, I'm not going to, as the early Christians, we're trying to be forced to just burn one pinch of incense to the emperor as divine. Oh, just one little pinch of it. And a lot of them went to the, were killed, martyred because they wouldn't burn one pinch of incense. So,
yeah, we find that a lot of Christians are hesitant to, in their view, kind of press their rights because they feel like, Christ called us to turn the other cheek. We shouldn't be combative. We shouldn't be aggressive about our rights. We should just live, humble and quiet lives, as I think Paul says in certain parts of Scripture. But on the other hand, Paul himself pressed his rights as a Roman citizen so that he could continue to spread the gospel. And so we see our role at MFI in part as preserving, keeping the door open for the gospel, because if we don't stand on the rights that we have under, the Constitution, under state law, how long will it be until Christians really can't be in the public square anymore and can't publicly proclaim the gospel? It's not about people vindicating their own rights. It's not about getting revenge on woke school districts or something like that. It's about making sure that Christians can continue to communicate the gospel to the wider world here in Massachusetts.
And some of these conversations are not just irrelevant. They're about truth, about the truth of human sexuality, with the truth of what is, as John Paul II would say, the culture of life versus the culture of death, and that God desires flourishing. So a lot of the reality, as we see more and more in a lot of this stuff, is the it's not just indoctrination of bad ideas, but it's bad ideas that are really destroying people, destroying lives. So
that's right. Yeah.
So it's in a way we're defending the good. We're not just defending ourselves.
That's right. And I mean, interestingly, so we're local counsel on two pretty high-profile lawsuits right now, where in both those cases we're representing people who are not believers.
Oh, interesting.
But they believe the truth and they're speaking up for the truth.
Can be assigned.
Yeah. So one of those, I'll just quickly.
Yeah, because unfortunately we're out of time.
Oh, are we?
No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
Do it.
One of
Yeah.
those is Liam Morrison. So he was a 7th grade middle schooler in
Oh,
Middleborough,
yes.
and he
I
wore a
remember
shirt that
seeing
said,
that in the paper.
yeah, there are only 2 genders,
Yeah.
and had to be sent home from school because of that. And you know, Liam doesn't have a religious basis for that, but he's just standing up for truth.
Yeah.
And then the other one is in Ludlow. You know, some parents are suing the school committee because the school secretly socially transitioned their kids behind their back, used different pronouns and names for them
Yes, I
without
do.
telling them. And that family's not religious either. But again, these are
Yeah.
values that I think everybody should be able to recognize need to be defended.
Well, thank you. Blessings on your work. It
Thank
sounds
you
like
very much.
exciting. Well, and I consider my contributions to MFI well spent
Well, we
by people like
certainly
you.
appreciate it.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation even more. I hope you'll continue to connect with our brother at Mass Family Institute, their website, MFI, to learn about the work they're doing, the gospel work they're doing in the public square. So, and may God bless you as well in your witness in the world to Christ.